The online debate over gender issues is getting unhinged.
I think the men should work, but they should maybe do things that they're more inclined to do. I don't think we need to conscript men to go become nurses wearing frilly little dresses.
We're going to break down some recent clips from the Whatever podcast, a super viral podcast on YouTube and a guilty pleasure of mine that pits alpha male influencers and social conservatives against OnlyFans girls and feminists in debates that go on for hours and rack up millions of views. But first, I'm Brad Palumbo, and welcome back to Mediaite, your home for commentary and coverage on the intersection of politics and media. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and sticking around, and maybe even turning on those bell notifications. And don't forget to like and comment as we go along. Now we're going to analyze some clips from a recent appearance on the Whatever podcast from Michael Knowles, who's a host for the Daily Wire and a social conservative and right-winger. He debated several feminists for almost 3 hours, and the clips from this debate, to me, show just how insane the online discourse on gender issues is getting. Here's the first one I want to talk about.
There's a ton of marriages in which women are also working and then also showing up a lion's share of the household duties, and that's why they're unhappy, because now they're being burdened in two directions.
But so what's the solution to that?
Men showing up more on domestic duties, but they won't because of freaking tradcons and neocons who are telling them that it's gay and beta if they do these certain tasks.
It is gay and beta most of the time, I agree.
And I also think that's why men are suffering. So for instance, like the unemployment rate of men returning back to the workforce is very, very high right now, and that's because feminists are kind of pushing for this like revanchist return to just like older times. And even though you claim you're not trying to turn the clock back, a lot of the solutions that feminists are advocating for just won't help men, because the burgeoning sectors right now are overly feminized. It's stuff like nursing, childcare, hospitality, and these industries are actually reaching out to men and they're trying to recruit them, but a lot of men will turn them down, and instead they're sitting on their ass. They're addicted to opiates. Like over half of unemployed men are addicted to some sort of painkiller. They're playing video games all day. They're to porn, which is yes, one problem, but there's so many others. And feminism is what's telling men, like, leave your toxic masculinity behind, join a nursing career, join a teaching career, but they won't do it because of tradcons and neocons telling them that they're gay and beta if they do these kind of like unwarrior-like positions.
But I do think that it's not just a matter of social construction. I think women are more nurturing.
The nursing programs and teaching programs have like put out research of why men won't join these industries despite them reaching out, and one of the biggest reasons is because they feel like it's overly feminine. Do you think that's due to liberal feminism or due to conservatism?
No, I think it's just natural. I think the men should work, but they should maybe do things that they're more inclined to do. I don't think we need to conscript men to go become nurses wearing frilly little dresses.
And why do you see that as putting on a frilly dress to go into like nursing and hospitality?
Because you're using that example.
You're presupposing that it's feminine and gay. You're doing the thing.
It is more feminine. Yeah.
So, we're at a point in 2024 where Michael Knowles, an ostensibly serious conservative intellectual who headlines CPAC and hosts a show that millions of people tune into, is unironically describing men who help their wives around the house with housework as gay and beta. Something is deeply broken, because there's nothing beta about any of that. It's actually just called being a good husband and chipping in and being an equal partner in your marriage. Also, why on earth does Michael Knowles think that nurses wear frilly little dresses? Has he never heard of Scrubs? Ironically, for the full 3-hour debate, which I did watch all of, so you don't have to, Michael rails against the dangers of pornography and how it warps men's perception of women and sex. But while I don't know what Michael gets up to in his free time, I really can't think of where he would have gotten the idea that nurses wear frilly little dresses, other than porn. Anyway, so often these debates are really frustrating to watch because the alpha male types and the red pill influencers, they take a point that might have a tiny little grain of truth at the heart of it, but then take it to a ridiculous extreme and immolate their own credibility with their unhinged rhetoric. Because, while unlike Michael, I don't think there's anything wrong with men being nurses or teachers or anything like that, I do actually think that even in an egalitarian society with no discrimination or stigma, men and women probably would choose different things on average. We're speculating here, but I do think that more women than men would probably choose to become nurses just naturally if there was no barriers and no stigma or any of the kind of things that Michael is perpetuating. And if different outcomes were reached absent discrimination, as far as I'm concerned in my book, that's okay. One of the ways that I think liberal feminists do sometimes err is when they see any discrepancy as de facto evidence of discrimination. It sometimes can be, but it can sometimes also just reflect population-level differences that are, to some degree, innate. But of course, Michael Knowles had to make this point in the most obnoxious and distasteful way imaginable, because that's what will get clicks, that's what will go viral, and that's what will make more money for his podcast and for him. Which is why I think this clip is kind of a microcosm of what's wrong with the online gender debate, which is increasingly toxic and in desperate need of more light and less heat. Now, here's the second clip from the Whatever podcast that I think is worth discussing and kind of shows how unhinged all of this is getting.
Let's be honest, if all men disappeared tomorrow, shit would hit the fan.
Do you think if all women disappeared, shit wouldn't hit the fan?
It would not be good, but like, society would continue functioning. Men keep society functioning.
What about when men left and every woman became Rosie the Riveter? Shit didn't really hit the fan?
I assume you're talking about World War II. I mean, not all men went off to war, but women did show up for the war effort.
So doesn't that prove that women can rise to the occasion and do male-dominated jobs if the need arises?
With the appropriate planning and time, but the specific scenario is if all women disappear or all men disappear, you wouldn't have the necessary time to introduce women into these critical fields.
So men are vilified and undervalued because if you gave women 24 hours to resume society after their disappearance, we would need more time?
I'm saying men don't get enough appreciation. There's too much vilification of men in society. It's cool to like shit on men from like typically feminists when it's because of men like electricians, people who work in infrastructure, transport, that society functions, and these men are not appreciated.
Why on earth are millions of people interested in this weird hypothetical? It's just obvious to me that if half of society, either gender, disappeared, society would be screwed. I mean, I can't believe that these red pill influencers, or whatever they call themselves, actually can argue with a straight face that we would get by fine without women in the workforce, but not without men. Of course we couldn't get by without men in the workforce, obviously, but the same is definitely true for women. Do they not realize that almost every school, hospital, and daycare in America would cease to function overnight if women stopped working? Also, make it make sense. These types are simultaneously arguing that men doing women's jobs is feminine and not okay, but these same types also want women to stay at home and not work. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm missing something, but it would seem to me that you can't have both of those things at once. And once again, they're responding to something that might be real or might have a grain of truth, which is society increasingly undervaluing men's contributions in some pockets and taking it to absurd extremes and using unhinged rhetoric that discredits their original point. Anti-men internet content does regularly go viral, especially on TikTok, and I do think it's prejudiced, counterproductive, and divisive. But people who are put off by this rhetoric and are concerned about it shouldn't be trying to argue that actually men are more important than women. They should simply be trying to take down the temperature on these debates and remind everybody that nobody's importance or value is determined by their sex. I honestly wish I could tell you guys that these clips and these videos are just fringe outliers from niche pockets of the internet, but that's simply not the case. The most popular voices in the online discourse over gender issues are increasingly completely unhinged. And that's something that should concern anybody who actually cares about equality for the sexes and prosperity and harmony in our society. Alright guys, that's it for this video. Let me know in the comments what you thought of these crazy clips, and if you're still here, you must have found something interesting or insightful about this video, so please do consider dropping a like as well. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications. And with that, I'll see you all in the next video.